California finally did it. They looked at the most reliable, most popular handgun left on the shelf and said, "Nope, that's unsafe because criminals refuse to follow the law. You can't make this up." Only in a place obsessed with headlines over outcomes do leaders watch illegal conversions blow up on social media and decide the fix is to punish the people who weren't breaking anything. Not the gangs, not the traffickers, not the internet peddlers hawking illegal parts, the neighbors who filled out forms, waited their turn, and bought from the state-approved list. The message is simple and deranged. It's your fault that criminals refuse to obey the rules. If you're new to this circus, the state runs a thing called the handgun roster. It sounds clinical, like a lab coat created it. In practice, it's a blacklist dressed up as a whitelist. The trick is language they don't say ban, they say safety, then force manufacturers to jump through hoops, add a loaded chamber indicator here, a magazine disconnect there, and then the sci-fi buzzword politicians adore microstamping, as if carving a microscopic autograph on brass magically arrests intent. Most companies looked at the engineering cost, the testing gauntlet, the lawyer bills, and said, hard pass. The roster shrunk, shelves thinned, and every time a feature failed in the real world or proved vaporware in the lab, the answer from the podium was never to admit the mistake. It was to double down, add another hoop, and call it progress. For years, that strategy left one practical option on California shelves, the polymer workhorse everyone from rookies to rangemasters could run and maintain in the dark. It wasn't a cult, it was a default forged by scarcity. When choices collapse, the remaining tool becomes the training standard, the holster standard, the parts ecosystem, the Saturday morning conversation at the range. People learned it, drilled it, and trusted it. The implied deal was simple: play by the rules. Buy from the list, and you're fine. Keep your receipts, keep your head down, and nothing about your perfectly legal purchase will suddenly become contraband because a teenager on the internet did something stupid. Then came the newest trick. Lawmakers wrote that any handgun readily convertible to fire automatically by installing a conversion device is unsafe and shall not be added to the roster. Translation for normal humans: if a criminal can slap an illegal switch onto it, the gun itself becomes the villain. That logic is nonsense anywhere else. We don't outlaw Honda Civics because street racers bolt on turbos. We don't outlaw smartphones because hackers jailbreak them. We don't outlaw home routers because script kiddies flash shady firmware. We punish the people who commit the crime. Except here, the appliance is the defendant because it's easier to throttle the compliant than to confront the violent. Politicians get a headline, bureaucrats get another checkbox, and the people who followed every rule get fewer choices and more lectures. Here's the part the press skims past: those little switches are already illegal under federal law. Felony, years in prison, heavy fines. That isn't a policy proposal, that's the law today. If government actually cared about outcomes, it would hammer the traffickers, prosecute the buyers, and stack charges on anyone waving a converted gun at another human. Instead, it points at the millions who never hurt anyone and declares their appliance the crisis. Enforce the law against criminals, too hard. Rebrand compliance as danger easy. And that's the lesson. When regulators can't control criminals, they regulate the compliant. Accept this logic and everything with a trigger, a battery, or a motor becomes unsafe by association. This isn't safety, it's control dressed as concern. Stick around. Drop a comment. Share this with someone who still thinks the roster protects them. And be here for the next chapter, because the goalposts are already moving. They always do. You know it. Let's be clear about what this new trick does in the real world. When lawmakers stamp readily convertible onto a spec sheet, they aren't hunting cartel machinists or offshore vendors. They're blocking ordinary buyers from the one handgun that still cleared the state's obstacle course. If a pistol can accept an illegal device that is already a felony to possess, the state labels the pistol itself unsafe and slams the roster door. Manufacturers are shoved into a binary choice redesign, a platform that already works. Risk lawsuits over a moving definition or walk away from the market. Most know exactly which option is cheapest. Consequences show up fast in the grinding. Predictable way only bureaucracy delivers. Prices climb because scarcity taxes the compliant. Wait times stretch because a shrinking roster has to soak up steady demand. People drift to consignment cases and the used market, where yesterday's perfectly legal purchase becomes today's problem child, even though the steel and polymer haven't changed one atom. Paperwork changes, not physics. Meanwhile, the press conference glow is treated like progress. Even as shelves thin and the people who did everything right get lectured about safety by officials who wouldn't know a recoil spring from a radiator hose. Here's the punchline. None of this touches the pipeline that matters. The crowd flashing illegal gadgets isn't shopping the roster, filing forms, or chatting about holster fit. They order contraband and snap parts into place because they don't care what a statute says. When the state criminalizes an appliance instead of criminal conduct, it declares that performative control outranks measurable safety. You can plot the cycle on a calendar, announce the rule, bask in headlines, watch nothing improve on the street, announce another rule. Rinse, repeat, congratulate yourself. Insist the next restriction is the one that finally tames lawlessness. Now to the courtroom, where this roster has lived for years. A federal district judge looked at the micro-stamping fantasy and said in plain English that demanding a feature the industry cannot reliably produce is not regulation. It's prohibition with extra steps. Relief was granted. Then the Ninth Circuit stepped in to keep the broader scheme alive while arguments crawl forward. Because the institutional reflex is always the same, preserve the status quo, hear appeals, talk about history, and hope time erodes resistance. The law limps along, collecting exceptions and caveats like barnacles, pretending that ever narrower choices equal public safety. The legal principle underneath is simple. You don't erase a common tool used by millions of peaceful citizens because criminals sometimes modify it. Rights aren't contingent on the worst person doing the worst thing. We punish the criminal actor, not the inanimate object. Every time the state tries to flip that logic, it tells you the real target is ownership itself. That's why these cases keep coming, why the roster keeps earning new scars, and why this latest definition game reads less like safety and more like a slow, administrative choke on lawful possession. Zoom out. Some states adore the California-style dense checklists, feature bans, purchase delays, licensing rituals, and a public sermon about need. Others cut friction down to background checks and training, trusting citizens more than paperwork. The split matters because manufacturers don't build 50 different Americas. They build product lines. When one huge market demands one-off designs, the cost spreads to everyone. Innovation slows, support shrinks, and small companies never enter at all. The end result is exactly what control-first politicians prefer: fewer choices, higher prices, and a narrative that blames the remaining options for the scarcity they engineered. There's also the quiet national ripple. Distributors reallocate inventory. Training programs rewrite curricula. Armorers juggle parts that make sense in one zip code and vanish in another. A roster in one state becomes a headache in 3, then 5, then more, because supply chains don't recognize political borders. The burden doesn't land on criminals, it lands on the compliant, the cautious, the people who actually read instructions and keep receipts. So, here we are, a definition stretched, a press release drafted, and the people who obeyed every rule told their reliability is the threat. That flips enforcement into scarcity and trains exactly the wrong crowd. Keep breaking the law and the government will keep punishing somebody else. Stay with me. Because next we're going to talk about the human fallout, the families who lose options, the officers stuck with inconsistent equipment, the shops that close, and the quiet, measurable damage hiding behind the word safety. Let's talk about the human fallout. Because policies don't live on paper, they live in homes. When the roster shrinks and readily convertible becomes the excuse to exile a platform, families lose the one tool they actually trained with. Muscle memory doesn't transfer because a committee wished it so. Triggers break at different weights, sights sit at different heights, holsters don't fit, and reliability quirks appear precisely when stress is loudest. People on fixed incomes get priced out, and the quiet household that budgeted for practice ends up rationing ammunition and skipping range time. Safety declines the moment compliance becomes scarcity. Then there are the officers who have to live with political choices at street level. Mixed equipment means mixed performance. Academy curricula standardized around a platform suddenly don't match issued gear. Armorers hunt parts, swap springs, rewrite maintenance schedules, and pray the next procurement doesn't yank the rug again. Consistency is safety for professionals. 2. When leadership plays feature roulette to impress a press conference, the people who will run toward danger get saddled with inconsistent tools and the blame when inconsistency bites. Small shops and instructors get crushed between regulation and reality. Inventory that was legal last quarter becomes stagnant overnight. Financing costs rack up while customers stare at empty pegs or the wrong SKU. Compliance paperwork swells, audits multiply, insurers get spooked, and course rosters thin because students can't buy the platform the syllabus was built around. Gunsmiths who kept fleets running for years have to tell loyal clients there's nothing to be done except wait, hope, and pay more. That's not safety culture. That's attrition masquerading as virtue. Politically, the play is obvious. Announce a rule that sounds surgical, sell it as common sense, and let the headlines baptize it as courage. You'll never see a podium admit that the federal felony attached to conversion devices already exists. You'll hear a hymn about closing loopholes, as if criminals file compliance checklists before hurting people. This is optics in search of evidence, a brand strategy dressed as public safety. The most honest sentence in the whole show would be, "We don't know how to enforce the laws we have, so we're shrinking the pool of lawful owners instead." Media keep the carousel spinning. They love tight shots of seized gadgets and B-roll of illegal fire, cut against interviews where gun violence is treated as a mechanical failure rather than human malice. The villain is the object. The hero is the press release. What never gets 15 seconds of airtime is targeted enforcement against the tiny fraction of offenders doing the overwhelming damage. That is hard, expensive, and unglamorous. Stagecraft is cheap, people will say. Other countries did it. Sure, nations with no constitutional carryover, smaller black markets, island borders, and a cultural history that never normalized citizen arms. Copying their model here is like copying their electrical grid while swapping in different voltage, frequency, and plugs. You don't get light, you get smoke. The American reality is messy, federal, and litigious. Pretending otherwise isn't policy, it's cosplay. And here's the domino you can see wobbling already. Supply chains reroute to friendlier states. Training standards balkanize, and the lawful public pays more to do less. Criminals do what criminals do. If you accept this logic, the end state writes itself fewer lawful options, more moralizing, more power centered in the hands that failed at enforcement, and a public too exhausted to recall what normal used to mean. If you're still here, you know what to do. Speak up in the comments. Share this with one person who thinks the roster protects them. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next. This isn't about optics, it's about outcomes. Hold the line, hold your ground, and don't let anyone sell you scarcity as safety. Refuse the narrative that punishes the obedient and rewards the lawless. Demand real enforcement. Here's where we stop diagnosing and start prescribing. Real safety has a spine, not a slogan. You target criminal conduct, not appliances. That means 3 moves, executed hard. 1, choke the pipeline of illegal conversion devices with federal charges every single time. No plea bargains to nothing. Coordinated stings against importers, home manufacturers, and middlemen. Plus, real cooperation with customs and carriers to intercept shipments before they hit neighborhoods. 2, punish criminal use with stacked counts that actually stick: carrying unlawfully, possessing an illegal conversion device, pointing or firing during another crime, and set firm timelines so cases do not rot in backlog. 3, run focused enforcement against the small group driving most violence. Trace every recovered device, build supplier maps, and take the network apart instead of staging podium raids for television. Owners need a survival plan that doesn't worship paperwork. Keep training continuity by standardizing ergonomics across platforms. You can still buy similar grip angles, triggers, sights, and holsters. If the roster whipsaws again, your hands won't. Maintain logs, receipts, and safe storage records because compliance fights often collapse when documentation is airtight. Don't buy myths. Buy time on the trigger. Dry fire. Work fundamentals. Run scenario reps. Safety grows from repetition, not from committees. Stay within the law, know your local requirements to the letter, and refuse shortcuts that hand enemies the narrative. Expect the courtroom to matter more than the podium. Vague terms like readily convertible invite litigation because vague rules invite arbitrary enforcement. A statute that punishes ordinary possession for what a criminal might bolt on later confuses cause with convenience. In plain language, if the state can outlaw a common tool because someone else could break a different law with it tomorrow. The target isn't danger, it's ownership. Judges notice when a rule functions as a backdoor ban dressed as safety, when ordinary citizens cannot tell what is legal today and illegal tomorrow. Industry should stop pretending 50 custom markets are sustainable. Build once, with modular compliance kits that can be added or removed without redesigning entire platforms. Publish durability and parts life data so agencies and civilians can plan. Support armorers and trainers with parts commonality across models, and keep warranties real even when politics shift. What should you watch next? Prosecutors either file real charges on conversion cases or they don't. Agencies either seize the supply lines or they chase headlines. Legislatures either fix vague language or squeeze the compliant. Score it at home: prosecutions, seizures, clarity. If those numbers slide while shelves get barer, you already know the truth. Measure outcomes, not feelings, not hashtags, not podium applause. Measure crimes stopped, devices seized, and innocent people unharmed in your community. Comment, share, subscribe, then hold the line.